Good afternoon and welcome to Worse Than Pandemic, Climate Change, Threats and Opportunities, presented by the Israel Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines in cooperation with the Israel Embassy, Manila. Please welcome this afternoon's moderator, ICCP Treasurer and Head of Education Committee, Mr. Michael Makatangay.
Climate change is a long-term alteration of temperature and typical weather patterns in a place. Climate change could refer to a particular location or the planet as a whole. Climate change may cause weather patterns to be less predictable. These unexpected weather patterns can make it difficult to maintain and grow crops in regions that rely on farming because expected temperature and rainfall levels can no longer be relied on. Climate change has also been connected with other damaging weather events, such as more frequent and more intense hurricanes, typhoons, floods, drought, forest fires, winter storms, and many others. In polar regions, the global warming temperatures associated with climate change have meant ice sheets and glaciers are melting on an accelerated rate from season to season. This contributes to sea levels rising in different regions of the planet. Together with expanding ocean waters due to rising temperatures, the resulting rise in sea level has begun to damage coastlines as a result of increased flooding and erosion. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our Israel Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines ICCP webinar event, Worse Than Pandemic, Climate Change, Threats and Opportunities. I am Michael Sherwin Makatangay, the ICCP Board Treasurer, Head of ICCP's Education Committee, and I will be your event moderator for today. Before I continue, I'd like to let you know that we are live on ICCP Facebook page. Please like and share. I also invite all of you to follow us on Instagram at israelchamber.ph, Twitter at israelchamberph, and on LinkedIn. I also would like to acknowledge our valued sponsors for today's event, our Platinum member, Exlinkevents, our gold members, Dayanan Business Consultancy and Star Keiko Share. Thank you for your usual support. We do not want to keep you waiting, so let's start the program with a few words from His Excellency, Israel Ambassador to the Philippines, Ambassador Ilan Vlos.
Thank you very much, Michael, and thank you for inviting me and letting me again open another meeting of ICCP. It's really a pleasure to be with you. I would like, before I sort of dwell into the issue, which is really a global challenging issue, I would like also to acknowledge Yorai Ofek, the president of ICCP. I'm not sure if he's here today with us. But I would like also to recognize architect Felino Palafox and also Yusek Makudita Sombela of NEDA. And it's really it's important that they are with us today. And also to recognize Dr. Corzon Claudio, Co-Vener Chair, Climate Action and Sustainable Alliance. And two guests from Israel, Dr. Aaron Chachanover, you'll introduce him later. He's a Nobel Prize winner in chemistry and professor in the Technion, the Israeli Institute of Technology. By coincidence, my son is a student there just now. And also Mr. Uriel Klar, the director of Planetech. And I want to thank Uriel for really accepting the invitation and joining us today. Dwelling down to the issue of climate change, which is a global issue, that we are dealing with this at the global community. Israel gives great importance to the issue of climate change, and I have to say that it is especially the case with this current government that is pushing Israel to take bolder and more challenging steps and commitments in the effort of mitigating and adapting to climate change. Climate change is a threatening and affecting all aspects of life, if it is from water, food security, health, energy, infrastructure, cities in coastal areas, national security, you name it. It is a great challenge for our countries, economies, and well-being. Specifically, when we talk about Israel, it is a country that has already a dry climate. So we are dealing in Israel with climatic challenges since and even before Israel was created in 1948. So the challenges of extreme climatic events, which mainly in our case are the droughts and floods, are the norm in Israel, and we had to develop solutions. And that we say necessity is the mother of invention. How can we do more with less? We have less water, less soil, more challenges, but how can we do more produce? This is when we talk about agriculture. And we had to do it. Israel, as a global hub of innovation, believes that technology and innovation have to be part of the basket of strategies and solutions for climate change. And this is what we did in agriculture. We developed best practices, and we developed different innovations. The simple and the well-known one is the drip irrigation, but it is much more than that. Today, it is what we call smart agriculture. And this is why Climatech as a community was established about 1.5 years ago, formalizing the approach and getting the innovation community of climate together to enhance collaboration and develop innovative solutions to the challenge of climate change. And we'll hear more about it later from Uriel. So back to the Philippines. I believe that creating bridges of innovation, and this is my mantra, and this is something I really deeply believe in, and I want to see this happening, and we're working on that. And I believe that creating bridges of innovation and technology between Israel and the Philippines is the most important next stage in the relations between our two countries. To get innovators together, exchange ideas, and understand each other's challenges and solutions, think and work together on the issue of climate change, this will bring better and local solution to the Philippines. I wish all of us an interesting event that will create more interest and bridges of innovation between our two countries.
Okay, so thank you very much, Ambassador, His Excellency Ambassador Ilan Floss. And again, we would like to welcome all our esteemed participants in this Zoom, and also those who are watching at our ICCP Facebook page. Thank you very much for joining our webinar event this afternoon. So we are fortunate to have not only one, but 3 notable, knowledgeable, and esteemed guest speakers this afternoon. Before I begin, I'd like to let you know that we have a panel discussion after our last speaker's presentation. You can ask questions during the panel discussion later, and if a question comes to your mind, feel free to type on the chat box, and we'll try to answer during the panel discussion. So now let me introduce to you our first esteemed speaker. Mr. Uriel Clar is dedicated to connect technology, business, and environmental missions to solve climate change challenges. He established an environmental research venture, founded an air pollution technology startup, and developed global partnerships in a multinational water company. Mr. Clar leads Planet Tech, a climate change innovation community that promotes the development and implementation of climate change technologies across a broad sheet of sectors. Planet Tech functions as a network for the Israeli and global climate tech ecosystem, tackling the most prominent global challenge, climate change. Mr. Aurier Clar is a Bachelor of Science graduate in Environmental Engineering from the Technion, Israel Institute of Technology. So ladies and gentlemen, let us all give a warm virtual applause, please, to Mr. Uriel Clar.
Well, thank you for the warm introduction and thank you for inviting me over today to speak with you. It's a great honor and a great opportunity to speak about what Israel can do and already doing for fighting climate change. So I think I can start off by sharing presentation and getting just a second. Sorry. Okay, I'll try to share again. Okay, so our discussion today will be about how the tech industry can and should fight climate change. And not just because that's the biggest threat that we see for humanity at the moment, mainly because this is the biggest business opportunities that exist today and exist the biggest one since the internet. And this is not my words, this is words of bigger people than me, including Bill Gates, that said that climate tech will produce 10 companies in the size of Google and Amazon and Microsoft, and the CEO of BlackRock, which predicted 1,000 unicorns in the field of climate tech, and people like Jeff Bezos, who are pouring a lot of money towards climate change initiatives. I think this is a great indication of something big that is happening. Another great indication is the rate and growth rate of investments in climate technologies. When we look at a global scale, we see more and more investments in this field. And every year, more investors, more startups that are funded are getting increased investments. And we also see a bigger number of deals. So this is on a global level. We'll speak about Israel in a second. But I want to get to another point here. The reason that technology is a key factor in fighting climate change is that in order to reach net zero, we need not the technologies that we have today. We actually have a gap of 35% of the emissions that exist today with technologies that do not exist yet. Another 40% are technologies that are in early adoption, meaning that in order to actually decarbonize our economy, we need to see a faster pace of implementation, but also we must have more and more innovation that provides new solutions to decarbonization. And this is basically the reason that we decided to build Planetech. So Planetech is a joint venture of the Israel Innovation Institute and Consensus Business Group. We are an innovation community for climate change technologies, and a non-profit organization with a sole purpose, which is to shift the Israeli innovation ecosystem towards climate change challenges. And if we look at Israel and its great strengths when it comes to innovation, technology, startups, we see a lot of it dealing with fintech or cyber or other fields of innovation, which are great, but are not addressing the actual things that we needs to be addressed. So if we can shift the resources, the people, the money towards actual innovations that are dealing with climate change, there's a huge potential to see global impact. In Planetech, we're centralizing the entire ecosystem, from academia to startups, investors, government, corporates, and others, to have one place to communicate, to exchange ideas, and also to build new partnerships and projects. And the 18 months that we exist, we've built great partnerships with global stakeholders, including companies such as Microsoft, Orbia, Amazon, and investors on a global scale, both corporate venture capital and others. Of course, we work closely with the Israeli government, including the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Environmental Protection, and the Israel Innovation Authority, which are, as said before, actually looking on how they promote climate tech in Israel, and I'll give some news about that during my presentation. So there's a couple of things that we're doing in Planetech. The first one is to build and share knowledge. And for this, we've published a report that you'll see some outputs of very soon. And as we speak, there's 2 people from the Planetech team that are training 6 European countries on how to build their own Climatech report, because this report was the first one to map a Climatech ecosystem of a country. We're also supporting startups and innovators and investors by providing workshops and training them to explain their climate story, quantify it, and communicate it in the best way, since there's a big knowledge gap in the Israeli ecosystem around climate change. We also have a very great tool which exists in our website, which is the Planetech Startup Platform. In this platform, you can see nearly 200 startups in different fields, where you can basically click on your field of interest and just decide which company you're interested to look at, and you have their climate profile. So I invite all of you that are interested in Israeli climate innovation to go on our website, find this webpage, and you actually can connect with the startups directly through the platform. The other thing that we're doing is to help connect and implement. I will not go over all of their activities. I will mention only one significant that happened in COP26, where we led the Israeli event for the summit, including the president of Israel and ministers and 9 Israeli startups from the field. We had 50,000 people watching this event. And with regards to extreme weather events, which were mentioned before, we actually have an ongoing competition around extreme weather events, which includes wildfires and floods, with startups from Israel and outside of Israel addressing this field, dozens of companies with prices of $500,000 for winners in different tracks. So that's another thing that is happening, which can be interesting for this discussion. Now I want to switch over to speak about what is actually climate tech. What is this field? And unlike many sectors, here we see something which is cross-sectorial, because climate tech is referring to 2 main things. The first one is mitigation, how we reduce emissions or remove them from the atmosphere. And the second one is adaptation, how we adapt to the changing climate. And for this, we've decided to build in Planetech the Climate Challenge Map, which includes 20 different challenges in the climate area. And I'll go briefly over all of them. So the first pillar is the built environment, which includes clean energy systems and different infrastructure, including transport, buildings, and water. The second pillar is materials and manufacturing, where we see both circular economy, manufacturing, material supply chains, carbon capture, and others. The third one is land use, and this is how we impact our land, including climate smart agriculture, soil health, food systems, which are a critical part of this effort of decarbonizing the economy. And lastly, the natural environment, which is most of the time neglected. Here we put a lot of efforts around forests, oceans, extreme weather events, biodiversity, and Earth observations. And with all of this, we've come to build the Israel's State of Climate Tech report together with the Israel Innovation Authority. And this report really changed a lot. And before I'll explain how we changed Israeli climate orientation, I'll share with you some information from it. So we've discovered in this report that there's 1,200 climate companies in Israel addressing one of the 20 challenges that I just described. Out of them, there's 637 startups that are developing technologies in Israel. And this number is already growing. In this graph, you can see the amount of investments and the percentage of young companies. And you can see that there's some established fields like energy and mobility. There's some areas in rapid growth like alternative proteins and green construction. And there's other areas in early emergence. Now, this was published 7 months ago. Since then, all of these circles representing different areas of innovation already shifted to the right, meaning there's much more investments in companies in different fields. We already also see another interesting trend that every year there's more and more startups in terms of percentage of total new startups that are climate tech startups. This is also relevant because the total number of startups is declining. Still, we see a growth rate when it comes to the percentage of climate tech startups. Another very interesting thing that we've done in this report is using AI to map out where Israel is strong against other developed countries. And on absolute terms, we've discovered the following things. We've discovered that Israel is actually leader in cultured meat in irrigation systems, precision agriculture, desalination, and water technologies. And this is looking at absolute terms, so not normalizing anything. But when we normalized it to the R&D to GDP, we saw that Israel is actually taking leadership in other fields, including alternative proteins as a complete sector, including mobility, solar power, and circularity. And this really tells you how strong is Israel comparing to other countries, although it's of its small size. And all of us know and heard of the great innovation and the advancement in water technologies, and that's great. But there's much more to it. And the latest update that we've shared with the world is on record funding in Israeli climate tech startups, which reached $2.2 billion in 2021, which is 57% higher than previous year record. And this year, 2022, will actually break another record. And just to give you a few examples of what I was speaking about, and these are not the examples that you'll think about, but they're great because these are the 4 highest funding rounds of Israeli climate tech startups from the previous year. So the biggest round was from a company called Future Meat, which is developing sustainable cultivated meat technology. Using their technology, beef can be replaced with zero carbon or low carbon protein that reduce a lot of emissions. So that's a great technology to address a significant part of emissions globally. The second company called Wiliot, they developed a battery-free sensor that improves supply chain's footprint and reduce food waste. So this company is actually, you can look at it as an IoT company, but in the end of the day, their actual work reduce emissions, which is directly correlated to the business goals. The third company here, UBQ Materials, they're taking trash, domestic waste of any kind that you think of, like peels of banana, diapers, and anything else. They build out of it the most climate positive thermoplastic in the world. So taking waste and turning it into the greenest material that you can think of, that's another company. And the last one is VIA addressing mobility using their advanced digital rideshare platform. So these are the 4 highest funding rounds. There's many more, but you can see here, for example, that we didn't see anything which is agriculture related, water related, or energy related, although there are many companies, just because there's a wide variety of companies addressing all of the different climate challenges. I'd like to share with you something really exciting that we're working on, and really sharing the mission of this webinar as well. We've decided in Planetech to build a climate tech conference, a conference which is global and brings together different stakeholders from the world that wants to see how innovation can address climate change. And this conference happening in September 21st will have 1,500 people, 100 startups, 7 stages. We already have international delegations from the entire world coming to Israel to learn, see, and interact around climate technologies. This is specifically exciting because 6 weeks after the conference, COP27, the UN's climate change conference, is taking place. So I'll show you a quick video and then I'll let you know what we're doing in COP27. Great. So that was a quick teaser for the conference. And as I said, 6 weeks later, COP27 is taking place. In COP26, as I told you, we've built the biggest and most dominant Israeli event for climate innovation. This time, we're going to select 10 startups that will represent Israel as the tech delegation to COP27. And since COP27 this year is taking place in Egypt, the delegation will be a zero emissions delegation using electric vehicles. We have a border with Egypt. We're going to use it in order to have a real climate delegation, which is not using airplanes where there's no actual need. And in COP27, we're going to host the Climate Innovation Summit, broadcasted to the entire world, showing the top companies that are addressing climate change in Israel. So I invite you to connect with us. This is my email address. To speak with us, to share with us your ideas for bridging Israel and the Philippines when it comes to climate change. I welcome you to come to Israel to the conference in September 21st. I think this is a great opportunity to have exposure to everything that is happening here in Israel, but also to global trends and global experts and speakers. And I want to thank the organizers of the event and wish you all a great session. And thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clar. So let us now move on to our second STEAM guest speaker. Dr. Corazon P.B. Claudio is the convener and chair of Climate Action and Sustainability Alliance, or CASA. Our multi-awarded speaker is a Towns Awardee, a Balik Scientist Awardee, and a Management Association of the Philippines Distinguished Service Awardee. She has a doctorate degree holder and an honorary alumna for Management Science and Engineering from Stanford University. Among her advocacies include climate change, waste and energy management, well-being economy, natural capital accounting, maritime and archipelagic nation awareness, S&T promotion, IP inclusion, social enterprise development, and many, many more. Ladies and gentlemen, let us all give a warm virtual applause, please, to my good friend and colleague at the Management Association of the Philippines and CASA, Dr. Corazon P.B. Claudio.
Can you see me?
Yes, Dr. Claudio.
Can you see my can you see me in Prezi? Let me see. Okay. Can you see the full screen in Prezi? It's a little bit different from it is within Zoom, but it is different from using Zoom. Okay?
Dr. Claudio, may we suggest you can remove the virtual background on Zoom?
Virtual background on Zoom. Wait. Virtual background on Zoom.
Yes.
Okay. I already put Prezi camera, so that should not appear. The virtual background on Zoom should not appear.
Yes po, but the virtual background is covering the whole presentation po. If you're using the Prezi camera at the moment.
Yes. Okay. Try this. Are you seeing the Zoom? My full slide?
Unfortunately, no po. It's being covered by the virtual background on Zoom.
Still not?
Yes po.
Okay.
May we have Sir Mike back
Yeah.
as we sort out the technical
Yeah.
glitch?
So apologies for that. No. So while we are checking on the presentation of Dr. Claudio, so again, let me remind everyone. No. So please, if you have questions on our three speakers, so please type in your questions at our chat box, and then we will go back to you. And then, of course, we have a panel discussion immediately after the presentation of our third STEAM guest speaker. And of course, we would like to inform again and remind everyone that we are live at our Israel Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines Facebook page. So we are actually stream live now. No? And again, we'd like to also again acknowledge and of course our sincere gratitude to our STEAM speakers and of course our guests, attendees for this afternoon. Of course, as mentioned by Ambassador Ilan Floss, no, we have as many VIPs from the different government sectors, from the different organizations, government and non-government organizations, and voluntary organizations. No? Indeed, that our topic for this afternoon, the climate change, is very, very important, no, and valuable, as it draws a large of people interested in joining this activity.
Okay. Uh, I don't know what is happening here. Okay. I should be getting the Prezi.
Actually, Dr. Cora, we can see you and your background. That's the only thing that we can see right now.
You don't see Prezi?
No, no. We can only see you and your background.
Okay. Why?
Dr. Cora, we can go to the Zoom options po on the video settings to check on the background and effects.
Okay, wait. Okay, I go to Zoom
Yes po?
and then
Video and then the small...
okay, I'm supposed to use Prezi camera, check it.
Yes po, that's correct po. But but we need to go to the background and effects.
Background and effects of okay.
The Zoom options and click none.
None. So it is background and effects, none.
Yes,
Okay,
there
there.
we go. Okay.
Got it.
Better.
So we can
Okay.
see it right now.
Okay. So let me remove that and now can you see me?
Much
Yes.
better po.
So I have my slide beside it.
Yes po,
Okay.
much better po.
Okay.
So first, I'd like to thank President of ICCP OFEC and others, other officers, especially Dr. to be Mike Makatangay, our moderator, and our Secretary and Executive Director of ICCP, Jane Lopez. We both, well, the two of them and myself, we work hard for this. And we did that here, Ambassador Rafael Harpas. I came in a little bit late, so I don't know if I missed his welcome remarks. Now, there are two things that I don't like to cover much during my presentation. One is pandemic and crisis. I really don't like these two terms, okay? And I don't like us to join what my colleagues in PICAFI, the Agriculture and Food Chamber, NATO. What is NATO? No action, talk only. And so we will try to make this a fun sharing of thoughts. And as a photographer, which I am, I follow what we call the rule of thirds. So when you are taking a photo, be sure the image is 1/3, not at the center. And one very basic rule in photography, which environmentalists must really know, because they should always take photos of places that they visit. Identify your subject, focus on it, and simplify. And so that's what we will do today. We will identify some topics, we'll focus on them, only 3, and then we will try to simplify so that we can all understand each other. Okay? So this is my outline, 3, okay? And under each one, we have 3. Introduction, I'd like to share with you additional info on myself, some features of the Philippines and we Filipinos, and some basic concepts. And then selected areas to focus on, some issues and threats, not so much though, but we will discuss more noteworthy initiatives and other opportunities that can be the subject of stronger partnership between Israel and the Philippines. And then we will call for climate action and sustainability. Okay? So, next, additional info on myself. Okay, so those are three photos of me when I was young. One thing that is important when we are dealing with environment, science, and technology, according to Dr. Aaron Cichanover, whom we shall hear from later, is curiosity. And this is, as you can see, this is curious baby Cora. Okay, so my parents would allow me to roam around and look at things around me, and even open books. Even at the time I didn't know how to read, and because my father was a professional photographer, I also became a photographer afterwards and got introduced to it early enough. And I suggest that if you really want to appreciate our environment, you really have to fall in love with it, because if you love something or somebody, right, you try to protect it automatically. And so when I grew up, I became curious, and this is one place which I will invite all of you to visit. Masungi Georeserve in Tanay. It's very near, and that's a very beautiful place that you must really visit. And then I learn to appreciate things that I eat, especially. So I can claim that I eat my curtain in my kitchen. This is alugbati and that's ampalaya. And now I'm starting to relearn not only how to walk fast but also how to bike. And these two guys who are helping me do that are my apos. Okay? So they're very good in doing that. Everybody in my family bikes. Okay, introduction. Some features about the Philippines and Filipinos. As a country, the Philippines is a man. Those of you who have heard me in other webinars, I think know what I mean by that. With apologies to women in the group, okay? And Philippines is highly vulnerable to climate change. That's why we must care about it. And as I said earlier, creativity and curiosity are important Filipino traits that are related to addressing climate change risks with the help of science and technology. Okay, let me... I lost the... why is it asking me to add? Okay. There. Okay, we are a man. How many of us are aware of this? And how many of us consider it when we plan and act? And how can a woman like me become a better man? Okay? Okay, the Philippines is a man. It's a maritime and archipelagic nation composed of 641 islands, according to NAMRIA. That's the latest count. And our territory is 4/5 water and only 1/5 land. That's an important information that we must all know, especially the fact that we are an archipelagic and tectonically active archipelago. Okay? Water is more than 70% of our Earth's surface. The marine environment, oceans and seas that we are fortunate to be surrounded with, they constitute 97% of that water, the planet Earth's largest ecosystem. And we have the richest part of that marine ecosystem. We also do not, I think, appreciate that well enough. The center of marine biodiversity is in the Philippines. And for us to be more aware of this, there's a group of youth-driven Diskursong Territorio with some government and civil society groups that work hard for the issuance of Presidential Proclamation number 316, making September as Manamu. It's like our inheritance. Maritime and Archipelagic Nation Awareness Month. But then somebody also worked for the approval of having September as the Bamboo Month. And so we now have two, and sometimes we forget the Manamo part. Okay, the Philippines is highly vulnerable to climate change. This is an old map, but I like to use it because the color, the orange, shows clearly that we are vulnerable, because the more orange it is, the more vulnerable the site is. And as you can see, the whole Philippines, with the north becoming more orange, is really very vulnerable to climate change. This is the latest, more detailed presentation of the Philippine map with the risks that we face, but I like also the older one. This one is the older one, and what the head now of the UP Marine Science Institute, my colleague in the Towns Foundation, Dr. Laura David, and her teammates, Borja Villanoy and Alino, did is to divide the country into clusters, and for each cluster, they analyze the climate risks affecting that cluster. For example, I think we are about here in cluster 3. We face extreme heating events, disturbed water budget, and sea level rise. Okay, I just want to mention briefly creativity and curiosity, our important Filipino traits. These are works of our colleagues in the IP community Tiboli in Lake Cebu. They weave beautiful tinalak from our natural assets, from abaca, natural materials in our environment. And I really would like us to consider using these things that we produce, that we plant and produce, rather than import a lot of branded things. And one member of CASA, who's a leader in the bamboo industry, Ed Manda, is also working on producing creative arts, sculptures from bamboo. So that shows that we have this natural talent to be creative. Okay, some basic concepts. Sustainable development is a motherhood praise, and we'd like to present that in a simple way with the 4 Ps, which is very popular in the Philippines because of the SWD's 4 Ps, but we are defining it differently. And then we will discuss basic types of capital that we must consider when we want to consider a technology developed by us or by other countries in addressing some of the issues that are associated with climate change. So this is my sustainable development tool. I borrowed the original version of this from Shell, and I added one leg to add the first important component of this, the individual, the person, you, each one of us. That's the first P. The social, the people. This is not a literal translation, but then environmental, I consider the whole planet as the next P, and the 4th P is prosperity, which we express in economic terms. Okay, now what we want is every person will be healthier. These are our IP children, the ITAs. People, no or less poverty. Planet, that it remains to be biodiverse, especially our marine resources. And prosperity, we would like to have higher income. These are what we want to happen in the Sustainable Development Goals, you will see a goal for each one of them. On poverty, the problem is not only poverty, but social inequity. So these again are our ITA children. Not many of them are able to go to schools. They remain poor or leave their habitat due to lack of livelihood and growth opportunities, but such habitat contains our country's wealth, the minerals, water, biodiversity, and underutilized lands. So a big challenge to us is respond to IP's call for help. And by helping them, we also ensure our sustainability. So we have the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and this is important for us to consider climate change. We have one here, SDG number 13, Climate Action, but the whole thing should be considered in addressing climate change risks, from no poverty to partnerships for the common goals. Okay, let's go to the basic types of capital. I will cite to you why this is important for us to always remember. We have basically three types. Manufactured goods and services, which is the type of capital that is covered by GDP. Of these three, that's the only one that is directly measured as of now. We have human capital, indirectly measured because it's part of producing, manufacturing, and our natural capital, which is not really considered. So one of the things that we did in CASA is to work with Deputy Speaker before, Loren Legarda, who is now Senator-elect, to draft a bill addressing ecosystem and natural capital accounting, and it has already passed the first reading. Okay, so that is the background that I'd like to share with you. Now let's go to some selected areas to focus on where we can mention initiatives and what more we can do. And I chose these three: responsible consumption and production, that is SDG number 12, water and life below water, number 14, agriculture and life on land, number 15. And we will see what some companies are already doing and what more we can do. Okay, I'd like to start with my backyard, responsible consumption and production. My only son, Toby, who runs now Toby's Sports, I asked him, what are we doing to address these climate change risks? Well, Mom, I started with getting rid of our plastic bags. So this is a not so painful way of starting the process of addressing climate change. By using something that you can substitute with something better. So this one is plastic substituted with paper. So I asked him, how are you doing? Is it more expensive? Well, he said, it's a little bit more expensive, but if we are to remain to be the leader in the industry, we really have to be a leader in doing this. So we have to protect the brand. So for those who are thinking that this can be a costly exercise, think of that indirect effect that actually you will be strengthening your brand when you do it. And I think my only son is true in this. Now, I have a good friend. I had to disturb all those around me from whom I can get information quickly to be able to share this with you. One of the top three sanitary landfill operators is Isa Paredes Mercado, who is also a member of MAP, and her son is already helping her. They put up what is called Best Environmental Systems and Technologies, Inc. Because one problem in dealing with waste, which can be recycled so that we reduce our, for example, demand for oil, because we can generate oil from some of this waste, is that to optimally and not so expensively recycle them. If they are mixed, we have to do incineration, which is not allowed under our law and which we really don't like. Okay, so what they have introduced is this process of really segregating, having an exchange system where you can redeem points when you turn in some of the separated waste, and then this can be recycled. I think they are now working on the recycling, and we hope to help them on that. So they call it Trust to Cash Back program. I will leave this with you, so we will not go through these details, but that is one initiative. What we are trying to help here is we have a project that is a British friend of mine and a small team. We are trying to see how to convert plastic when it is already segregated from others, and there are different types, some are better than others, in producing oil. And one challenge that I have to our Israeli business persons who are with us now is to help us look for that technology, that's pyrolysis. But those in the market, that's almost monopolized by China. We want to look at other options also and see what others are doing. So converting separated plastic, there are different types with some are more efficient in producing oil. So that is one opportunity that we can look at. Okay, let's go to water and life below water, which is very important to us because we are floating in water as a country. SDG number 14. As I said, it is God's gift to us that we are hosting the Center of Marine Biodiversity, but unfortunately, water security is now a national issue, right? I don't want to go through that, but I'd like to point out that our fisher folks are still some of the poorest of our poor, and that is something that we should be able to address. And we tried to do that when I was chair of the MAP's Sustainable Development Committee by looking at the seaweed industry development, because seaweed is an important export product of the Philippines. I think we're number 2 or 3, but we are one of the top exporters of seaweed. And so we went to San Jose, Occidental Mindoro, which is the source of the best seaweed in the Philippines. Maybe some people will contest that, but that's true. And it's a beautiful place where you have beautiful seaweed farms. And when we look at the technology that they have, actually, that's the only technology there that is really extremely important, a dryer. So they have from something like this that falls apart whenever there is a typhoon, either a few meters away from the coast or very close to the coast, or they also do sometimes they use a pole and they hang the seaweed. So whenever the wind blows, all the sand goes to the seaweed. And so we ask help from the DOST, Secretary Boy de la Peña, who is one of my favorite cabinet members. He immediately acted on it and gave a grant to UPLB for them to develop a seaweed dryer. It's a simple one, and that, according to our contact there, increased the income of the seaweed farmers by 8 times. Not 8%, but 8 times. That is a very big change. So we should do more of this, and we hope that Israel's being a leader in technology innovation will help us. We also need to do marine research. So when I was in the board of advisors of the Philippine Navy, I helped for Foix, the head of the Philippine Navy, flag officer in command. And at this time, this was Vice Admiral Mercado, we convened the marine scientists and researchers, the leaders in the country. And you have their secretary, former DNR Secretary Angel Alcala, that's Dr. Laura David. So they all came, and we tried to collaborate, we were able to initiate a partnership with the Philippine Navy with at that time, one research ship, a white ship, because all the other vessels of the Navy are warships. But they have one donated by the United States. It's an old one, but it's still useful. And Dr. Maricor Soriano of the Department of Physics at UP also has a big project to look at marine resources and to take an inventory using a very simple technology. This is like a kite with a camera, and they take aerial view, and then they have something that is on a platform that they use to look underneath the surface of the water. So one issue is that we don't seem to know our environmental resources. We don't even have the correct Philippine map. I will not discuss this very much, but this to me is the correct Philippine map, which is based on this ancient map done by Murillo Velarde, which another Velarde, Mel Velarde of now, and the chair of the Asian Institute of Journalism and Communication, bought at an auction at Sotheby. So we have this, and those of you, especially the schools who do not have this yet, you can request a copy that's even framed from Mr. Mel Velarde. Okay, let's now go to Agriculture and Life on Land, or SDG number 15. That's a beautiful tree. I think you will agree. I took this in Batangas. We have many like that. We have actually nice native trees, and this is one of them. This is a banaba tree with beautiful flowers. And we have, this is not a tree, but a grass, bamboo. Okay, we have that as part of our natural capital. EDC, the Energy Development Corporation, that is headed, the president of that is Ricky Tantoco, who is now the president also of our Business for Sustainable Development, which used to be the Philippine Business for the Environment. So they have this Binhi program that nurtures, revives, propagate native trees. And so look at this one. I don't know what the name of this is, but it's one of the beautiful trees that they have been patiently attending to nurture these trees. Now, let's look at bamboo. Some target products, there are so many things that we can get from this, but the major ones, when Wasisip was still alive, he would always tell me, focus on bamboo for food. We have bamboo for construction, in external and internal, and we have, this is very much related to climate change because we can substitute this, they claim, for coal. It is pelletized bamboo. We do not have, we are starting to do that, but I guess we need help to put it at a commercial level. Food for humans and animals, we have Philippine Field Bamboo Exponents Inc., headed by one of the World Bamboo Organization ambassadors, Attorney Dulce Punsalan, and another ambassador, we have two of them, Miss Meli Bersalona, who used to work for INBAR, International Network for Bamboo and Rattan. So in her research, she has proven that if you feed the chicken with the leaves of bamboo, they produce better eggs. Okay, I have to test that. Now, this is the one that I showed earlier, one of the early beautiful bamboo houses. Not the ordinary ones that you see along the road. This was designed by the father-in-law of Cheche Lazaro. Cheche is a Towns awardee also. In Kay Jimenez, Carolina's Bamboo Garden in Antipolo. It's a beautiful structure, and everything in it is made of bamboo as well. Now we have more architects that are winning awards in designing bamboo structures. You are familiar, or you must have heard about Bali having different types of structures that tourists go to because they are really unique. Well, we have such architects also. We have creative architects, and this is in Mikey Romero's Polo Pavilion in Batangas, and he has been designing a lot of this. One thing that is notable is this bamboo footbridge made by, I understand they had an Indonesian consultant for this, but we made it, and this is the only one that survived a flash flood among footbridges like this on this area in Matina, Davao City. I saw this myself, and I took this photo actually. In Meli's place in Abra, she's one of those who first started producing furniture and fixtures from bamboo, and I really don't know why we have not yet shifted fully to using this in our schools. Maybe it's the lack of supplies. Bamboo for transport, one of our members, Brian McClelland, uses bikes like this for tourists in Intramuros. And you see here our outgoing tourism secretary and former Mayor Isko with this tricycle. Okay, one thing that we have not really attended to yet because it requires a technology that I don't think we have is bamboo for clothing. I took this photo when I went to China and studied the bamboo industry. This is a store where they sell clothing materials, the shawls, beautiful items, branded items. Okay, so this looks like silk. This is made from bamboo. That can bamboo can also be used for various health purposes like oil to get rid of itchiness. This is one store that we visited. Now, here in the Philippines, we have one company that has succeeded in bringing to market one called, I forgot now the name of it, but they call it pharmaceuticals, but because it is developed from farm materials. In Flor Tariela just stepped down as chair of the Philippine National Bank, and she is now still a board advisor. Right after she stepped down, she produced a book, Weedibles and Medicinals. So, from native trees that are tall, to weeds, we have them. And it's a matter of just recognizing their important uses for us to be able to really make use of them. And in her book, which I had the pleasure of editing, and that was published by the Department of Agriculture, she identified this. The Indian ambassador, when we had a meeting last time, got interested in this because India is also leading in the world in producing pharmaceuticals, medicinals from their native plants. And I think Israel also has projects on this. We are very much interested to collaborate with you on that. Now, this is one slide that doesn't have anything. Why? Because when I was doing this last night, suddenly we had a brownout. Okay, so I thought I will not fill it up, but I'd like to emphasize the importance of this SDG on clean energy, because right now we have, according to all my colleagues, I belong to the core team of MAP on energy, we have already an energy crisis. But what I am sad about is that why are we considering again reviving the Bataan nuclear power plant and looking at nuclear power as our savior? UK spent 10 years installing a nuclear power plant, 15 years to operate it, and they will require 20 years to decommission it. Israel, that is a leader in technology innovation, correct me if I'm wrong, my colleagues here from Israel, you have nuclear research reactors, but you do not have even one nuclear power plant. we are a man. We are an archipelagic country with many volcanoes. Why are we doing this? And we have many islands that are good tourism destinations. Why should we have a nuclear reactor in any one of them, even if there may be nuclear reactors that are being developed now in small scale? I think I will wait. Bill Gates is pouring money on it. I will wait for him to succeed during our lifetime in using nuclear power. But the reason why I presented to you the basic capital forms is that we have to consider those capital forms that we have in attending or in considering an energy option or any technological option in any industry. And for nuclear power, which by the way is the topic of my doctoral thesis funded by the US Electric Power Research Institute, I think I can stand firmly on technical grounds that this is not for us. We have we used to call it non-conventional energy because when I came back, I competed for a bid that USAID released on evaluation of then, this was in the 80s, and I'm proud to say that we were quite early in considering renewables. That was already about a year after they funded the Philippine USAID non-conventional energy program, and they wanted it to be assessed. So I competed with SGB, and they're good in evaluation, but then energy, I focus on it during my doctoral work, both in the coursework, because my coursework was funded by Stanford's Institute for Energy Studies, and my thesis, which was funded by EPRI. And I had as advisors the leading decision analysts and the leading risk analysis in the world. And I tell you that I will never support nuclear power for us. Okay, call for climate action and sustainability. First is, let us start with ourselves. Let's know our carbon footprint. And there is one NGO, Green Convergence, that is headed by one of our CASA members also, Nina Galang, who is very active on this. They are working on a program to determine your carbon footprint. Our, what that is it's a measure of the impact of our activities on the environment and in particular on climate change. The amount of greenhouse gases produced in our daily life through burning fossil fuels for electricity, heating, transportation, etc. And I challenge the chamber to start this in your community so that you can see how much the whole chamber members are contributing to climate change risks. Okay, climate crisis is a risk. How may we face it? This is a model that I developed in my thesis, and it was actually featured as editorial in the International Journal for Risk Analysis, because before the US EPA would say assessment, we have to assess first, then we manage. Okay. The problem is our companies, I think there has been significant improvement, but before, the risk management function is always under the finance person. Why? Because the major job then was to purchase insurance, because they thought that by transferring the risk to an insurer, they're done. No. Actually, risk management, I think, should be under engineering so that you can really assess rigorously the risks that you face in your company. So assessment, management, we have to start with communication to provide the ground that will allow good assessment and management to take place. And communication must envelope the process, meaning it must be there all the time. So, We have to do that. And so communication, what have we done? We started with a YouTube channel which we called CAS for You, without an H for the CAS, okay? CAS for You. Climate Action and Sustainability for Us, okay? And we have been running these videos on ecosystem and natural capital accounting. Please Google it and watch our, we have 2 episodes. Before, this was my younger version of me. I was in radio, DZRH, and it's important to really use the different media, print, radio, TV, social media, museums, in explaining climate change to our people. What we have done so far, after I left, I served the DNR, a senior advisor at the undersecretary level for a year. And when I left, my former staff, whom I'm very proud of because they're some of the best at DNR, because we were managing the foreign assisted programs, asked me to put together a book on climate change adaptation. So I solicited contributions from 100 organizations, 50 of which from MAP, so private, and the others from the academe and the public sector. So we have this book, and my call for action here is let us develop now another one that will focus on mitigation, because even some of our leaders don't believe that we should go into mitigation because they said we are not a big contributor to climate change. I think in the presentation of Dr. Aaron, you will understand why we have to do it, even if our contribution is small. Okay, so other potential communication projects that we hope we can partner with ICCP on, we want to produce an ebook from out of these videos that we are producing for our YouTube channel. We want to come up with a gourmet recipes book using bamboo, inspired by a project of Inbar on this. We want to resume a broadcast program on Kalikasan, Kaunlaran, and to add that's the name of my former program for 4 years at DZRH, and at prime time DZRH audience was about 2 million. So I hope I reach all of them, but we want to also add kapayapaan, because peace is an important feature here, no? As you will also hear from Dr. Aaron about. And for books, as I said, climate change mitigation, best practices in the Philippines, and I'd like to start with companies represented by the membership of ICCP. And climate change and introduction in different books that are understandable to our youth, from the lowest level of young children who can read, kindergarten level, senior citizens, because they can still be very productive. I really hate this icon that is used to show senior citizens, a person with a cane. I'm a senior citizen. I cannot imagine myself using a cane, okay? And IPs. So we need to reach all of them because they can help. And then I think we need an app that will allow, because we are all cell phone users, that will allow us to know more about what's happening around us in our environment and the risks that we face in not the fake news. Okay, we need information center where results of all of these researchers, good research projects that are going on in the academic community, but they are always by project. So when a project is done, we don't know where the data are, but we should be able to build a database of the resources that we have. And then we need a warning system. So those of you who are in the IT field, you can attend to this. Then we have a foundation, the Science Centrum. I sit in the board of the Philippine Foundation for Science and Technology. We are addressing the need to educate our youth. So we have stationary and mobile exhibitions where we explain tsunami and all of the phenomena and principles related to climate climate change, environment in general. Okay. Nasingit. That's our IP children. Okay. So now we're talking about the blue economy, which is important to us because we are a man. And there are already established industries, and there are emerging ones that we invite Israeli business persons to look at. This is according to Dr. Shell Habito, our former Socioeconomic Planning Secretary. Only fishery and aquaculture, maritime transportation, and shipping are the ones that are really counted for in our GDP. And they constitute about only 1.5%. But all of this can are already making some contributions and can be much larger. So we have to look at those. Now, there is a new economy that is now being talked about, that is the well-being economy, which is a global initiative by the Well-Being Economy Alliance, and that is looking at a new measure for measuring economic progress other than the GDP. And you have heard about also circular economy, from linear to circular. For example, the linear is extracting raw materials, but then circular is designing to avoid waste. So these are initiatives that are already starting to be practiced here, even at a minimum level still. So we have Nurture Wellness Village that is doing something on this. As I said, Masungi, my favorite georeserve in Baras. That's at the border of Baras and Tanay. You should really go there. Okay, so my last slides is an invitation for you to join CASA. Our motto is, we pray hard, work hard, and play hard. Okay, so we're always smiling, right, Mike? We don't want to think so sadly about pandemic and crisis and become members of NATO, okay? So out of our members in CASA of about 1,500, 4 have been invited already to sit in the cabinet, starting with our MAP president, Fred Pascual. So you will be in good company. And what we try to do is we want to develop, this is related to what Planet Tech, and I'm so happy to join them, is doing, to have a social enterprise for each major program. What is that? Well, it's a corporation that prioritizes addressing social issues, but also generating revenues for sustainability. I'm tired of raising donations, actually. Okay, potential social enterprise topics that we are looking at now in environment, to waste recycle, and this is, by the way, an invitation to offer of technologies, environment, waste recycling, and we are prioritizing converting plastic waste to oil, because plastic waste, unfortunately, we are, I think, one of the top 3 plastic polluters of oceans in the world. And in Emden Deep, which is in our second episode in our YouTube channel, you will see there Dr. Onda, who went, the first Filipino to go to the deepest part of the Philippines, Emden Deep, and he saw plastic waste there. Okay? Then water for drinking, mineral water especially, we have a project that's we are working on that, and we are looking for, this is simple technology, really, filtration, UV, and bottling. And then energy, I always want us to start with energy efficiency because I see a lot of wastage. I don't know how much electric bill you have, but I live now in a condominium, but when I used to live in a house, I had the smallest electric bill, and now I also still have, because well, I practice what I preach, and there is much that you can do in reducing electricity consumption, and we are wasting too much right now. Then we look at renewables. We have been looking at solar, wind, we have geothermal, but we also have OTEC for oceans and TISEC for smaller tidal in-stream resources between islands. We are looking at TISEC with the UP Marine Science Institute. Then education and communication, we have to target really the youth because they're the starting point. They're the ones who will inherit this country and this planet from us. The IPs, because they can contribute a lot because of the resources that they have in their ancestral domain. And senior citizens, I don't know why we are treating senior citizens like me badly. I hate that booklet, I tell you. Creative industry, we have woven materials, we have digital painting and photography, health and wellness and sports for disease prevention. We're looking at that. Insurance for non-life, because I don't think we are doing it right, that we are insuring our facilities automatically without even assessing what our risk. That's why the what you call secondary insurance of our insurance companies are very high. The premiums are very high because the insurers abroad in UK and others, they do not trust us well enough. Okay, technology transformation and trade. Okay, so I think this is the one that was shown to you by Uriel, and I like this chart because it shows what technology innovations the companies in Israel are working on now. So what do we do now? This is my last 3 slides. We may either crawl or fly or swim. Regardless of the style of working together, let's work together now to protect ourselves, our country, and planet Earth from climate change and other risks while enhancing our country's sustainable and inclusive development and growth. Thank you all very much.
Okay, so thank you very much, Dr. Cora Claudio, for that very insightful, knowledgeable sharing of information. Of course, definitely your call to action will be adhered by our Israel Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines and also with the government and other non-organization partners. Okay, so let me introduce to you our last notable and esteemed speaker. Dr. Aaron Saishanover is one of Israel's first Nobel Prize laureate in science and chemistry, earning his Nobel Prize in 2004 for his work in ubiquitination.
Ubiquitin.
Okay, sorry for that. He is honored for playing a central role in the history of Israel and in the history of the Technion, Israel Institute of Technology. Dr. Aaron is a distinguished university professor at Technion Israel Institute of Technology and a member of the USA National Academies of Sciences and Medicine. Dr. Aaron earned his master's degree in science in 1971 and graduated from Hadassah Medical School in Jerusalem in 1974. He received his doctorate in biochemistry in 1981 from the Technion Israel Institute of Technology in Haifa before conducting postdoctoral research in the laboratory of Harvey Lodish at the Whitehead Institute at MIT from 1981 to 1984. Let us now hear the presentation of Dr. Aaron as interviewed by his good friend, Dr. Cora Claudio. Again, thank you very much, Dr. Claudio, for making such arrangement because Dr. Aaron is really very busy. Okay, so we can play now the interview.
Good morning, Dr. Aaron Chikanover. We both belong to the science and technology community, so I'm sure that we have many topics to discuss, but our time is limited now. So I will focus on a topic that will allow us to share with others how we may use science and technology to avoid another pandemic, this time climate change. And you and a group of other Nobel laureates and other experts issued on April 29, 2021, Our Planet, Our Future, an urgent call for action. So your group called for what you refer to as planetary stewardship, or taking care, I guess, and managing our planet Earth responsibly. And you presented proposals on policy, mission-driven innovation, education, information technology, finance and business, scientific collaboration, and knowledge. We cannot discuss all of them, so let us focus on three of those areas that you have been working hard on: education, scientific collaboration, and knowledge. And we have three questions on each of these areas. Let's start, for example, on education. The first question is, what should the leading institutions on education, schools, as well as the business sector, where most of our participants in this webinar are coming from, and the general public on their own and together, do now to provide a foundation for effective planetary stewardship? So that's the first question. Let me give all three because I know that your mind works very fast and you can cover all of them at the same time. Second question is, what are the most important threats that may hinder and the opportunities that may facilitate building of the foundation for effective planetary stewardship through education? The third is, what opportunities do you see for potential partnership between your country, Israel, and the Philippines in promoting and achieving effective planetary stewardship through education? The last question that I will ask, covering all these three areas, which you might want to answer as you discuss each one, is, what have been the most significant initiatives taken by any country or group on those three areas that aim to bring about planetary stewardship? So let us start with education.
You were right to start with education because initially we thought that the problem is much more long-term and it will not occur during our generation, but we were wrong in our calculations. We see climate change hitting up all over the place. I just read that, there is a city in Pakistan where the temperature is going up to more than 50 centigrade. This is really unbearable. We are talking carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases like methane and so on and so forth. And the world is clearly behind. So first thing for people is to understand. I remember very well the previous administration in the United States. They did not believe in it. History is tremendous. So it's better to say it doesn't exist than to say, no, I don't want to invest in it. So the reason behind it, because if we don't do anything, this planet will not last. But as I said, education will not be sufficient. And education, I'm talking for kindergarten. We have to implant it in kindergarten because the world belongs to them. Then we have to go to elementary school. People have to grow on it like a value, like a moral value, like they are learning not to kill, not to steal, not to do harm. They have to learn not to do harm to the planet. Their lives. Then once they become adults, they become politicians, they become businessmen. It is with them already. But education by itself is not sufficient. We need also to involve deeply the business sector. We are moving to green industry, and that requires a whole transformation. Some countries, even they have the resources, are reluctant to do it because the private industry say, why to invest now billions of dollars? Education has to go hand by hand with policymakers and with the business sectors, and they are all partners to these efforts. Just education it will remain within the walls of schools and the walls of universities, will not exit from there, and it will be completely useless. Another thing that you mentioned is collaboration between countries. We do need to collaborate. We do need to collaborate on knowledge, and it doesn't matter whether it's between Israel and the Philippines or between any other countries. By the way, I strongly believe that collaboration should not involve only the integrity of the planet, but any scientific issue. And we can come to COVID-19 as another example that somehow didn't work well. I think that science is an international language, and it's the language of peace, probably the only language of peace I know. Science doesn't belong to a certain country, doesn't belong to a certain people. It's all to be shared. Big data about diseases, threats of pandemic, immunization, vaccination, all those should be shared. As part, because we are people, and people are people, doesn't matter whether they live in the Philippines, Japan, Brazil, Israel, any European countries, they have feelings. Health and education are fundamental elements that should be accessible to everybody. It's in the interest of the world not to keep populations behind. Doesn't matter where the population is, but certainly during times of emergency. And no doubt we are living in a time of emergency. So any knowledge that is emerging from any country, from any institution of higher education, should be shared. Of course, there are blocks on sharing, because people always say, this knowledge has a value. If I patent it, if I have a way to reduce carbon dioxide emission, if I have a way to develop a new battery to a car that will last forever, if I have a way to convert a gas operated factory into a sun energy operated factory, a clean energy, why should I tell you how to do it if I can make money out of it? So we should understand that there are blockades, but people talk, for example, for transient period of time to remove the patent protection on the COVID-19 patent and intellectual property, and to open it free to other countries, because it's our interest that even poor countries that cannot afford to buy for several $10 or $20 a dose of a vaccine should nevertheless enjoy the fruits of science. So governments should really interfere here and should find a mechanism to overcome intellectual property barriers in order to make, at least during time of emergency, this knowledge available to each and every one of us for the benefit of humanity. Because if there is a problem in the Philippines, and Philippine industry is emitting harmful gases, or India is living on primitive agriculture, and the cows or whatever are leading to emission of huge amount of methane to the air doesn't stop above India or above the Philippines. It's migrating all over the place. It will affect each and every one of us. We can draw physical borders between countries and drawing maps, but the air doesn't know maps, and so on and so forth. So I think that sharing and information and lowering the border, I'm not saying that we can cancel them altogether, of protection of intellectual property are essential for sharing knowledge, and this should be an international effort of all countries. So yes, education, very important. Sharing, extremely important, but again, it should be a common effort of several sectors, which is the scientific sector, the business sector, and of course, the political echelons. Those three should come together in order to find a solution.
Thank you very much. Totally covered two other areas, scientific collaboration and knowledge. You're doing a lot of work on cancer research. What's really the situation here and what's being done and what opportunities are there for collaboration between Israel and the Philippines, not only in technology transfer, but what I always refer to as technology transformation that is sharing at the level of knowledge.
Cancer is indeed a very mysterious disease. Despite huge progress that has been made, like, for example, developing immune therapy. We can immunize, we can activate the immune system to reject cancer. Despite the development of many drugs, cancer is still, I don't know about the Philippines, the #1 killer in Western countries. It is true for the United States, and it is true for Israel. I believe that in the Philippines, it might be maybe #1, #2. It's certainly shoulder with other leading diseases. And disappointingly, there are some cancers in which we have not made any progress, for the last, I would say, 30, 40 years. Take, for example, pancreatic cancer that is on the rise. And not only that it's on the rise, but it's hitting more and more young people. Take brain cancer, take liver cancer, which is very common in the East where you live, in Indonesia, Vietnam, the Philippines, and so on and so forth, because of infection with the hepatitis virus. So we didn't make almost any progress with those cancers, and it's still really killing a lot of people. So again, cancer is also a matter of research. We need to understand mutations behind, and accordingly, we need to develop drugs. But let me come to develop drugs, not only for cancer, but for any other diseases. This is something that always hits me. Maybe I'm too naive because I'm isolating myself in, the ivory tower of the academic life, and I'm not really walking on the streets where regular people are walking. But, if you are thinking about democracies like the Philippines, Israel, they are taking care, they are using our taxes, I'm paying taxes, and they're using the tax for education, they're using the tax for building infrastructure like roads, they're using the tax for defense. And they're using the tax also for welfare in order to help the less privileged. But even within the health sector, they are dividing it. So they are building hospitals, they are building public health system, but they don't interfere with drug development. Drug development has remained an arena that is completely handled by the private sector. Think about the big manufacturers of drugs. Now, private companies by nature are moved by money. They have share in the market, and whatever the board of directors want to see every year is an increase in the share. Otherwise, they take the CEO and kick him out of the window. So, and therefore, their manufacturing of drugs is always motivated by money. So they will not go to diseases that affect poor country. They will not go to parasitic diseases that affect Africa. They will not go to antibiotics because they realize that antibiotics people take for 10 days. Once the infection is over, they don't need it anymore. They are interested in developing drugs for chronic diseases that you will better take for the rest of your life. You start and you use it for decades to lower your hypertension, to lower your cholesterol, and for diabetes and so on and so forth. They don't want you to die from the disease, and they don't want you that the disease will be too short. They want you to live for decades with the disease. So all other diseases are neglected, and they have no interest of developing it. So there must be something that we need to convince the governments to interfere with the drug industry, maybe to incentivize them, maybe to subsidize it, maybe to develop their own facilities, governmental facilities. Like the government has the education in its hands. In Israel, the education is all governmental. Elementary education, higher education, university, it's mostly governmental. Health system, governmental. Army, governmental. what about the drug industry? You know, they should really enter some sectors in the drug industry in order to help it, to incentivize it, to develop drugs. Think about what happened in COVID-19. Now that we look at the map of COVID-19, only countries that had access to the Western-made vaccine. Therefore, only rich countries like Israel could afford buying enough vaccine to vaccinate the entire population. Other countries are still fighting. You know, Israel is now completely open. There is a little wave of Omicron now, but you know, no mask, no nothing. We are driving free, the airports are free, everybody is flying. Other countries are still under a lockdown. Health, food, education are fundamental human needs, and therefore they should be accessible to everybody, being taken responsibility by the government. And the prices of drugs are really, I mean, skyrocketing. Israel, by the way, has a very good program. We have a public health insurance that is very broad, and each year we are renewing it. So we are introducing new drugs, new technologies into the coverage, into the public coverage, and some old technologies are coming out. So every year the government adds budget in order to augment and to increase the basic health basket, which is already very rich. So if I need something, you know, for free, I can get a very broad coverage for my health in the public hospitals, and it's updated every year according to newly introduced modern technologies. But it's public. But we need more interference of government in regulating the pricing of drugs and maybe in incentivizing the industry. But the cancer, heart diseases, inflammatory diseases, and for countries in which people are living long now, brain diseases. I'm talking about dementia, about Alzheimer, about Parkinson, where people are not working anymore, they are in pension, they are living on a lower income, and they are really becoming needy. They do need very good health providing agencies, because this is the age when they start to deteriorate.
And you agree that all of these are affected by adverse changes in climate change, right?
We still don't know the extent, but it's huge. I just yesterday read about Pakistan, about this city that has 50 centigrade degree, that the rate of abortion is increasing dramatically with climate change. And I'm sure that it has a huge effect on our health, but since it's still a process in the going, I'm not sure that we do understand it to its deepest extent. And, you know, a long time, once more and more will be known, we'll be shocked to understand what climate change has done to our health. People are dying in the summer because they don't have air conditioning. They simply die because of the heat. But I'm sure that there are much more long-term effects that will be discovered along years, maybe affecting the heart, maybe affecting weight, maybe affecting thinking, our mental state, and so on and so forth.
There are many initiatives that are being taken, or like in Israel, you are doing a lot. What can we replicate, work on, where you may also mentor us on, partner with us, that may also have commercial opportunities that can be offered to the private sector? What can you be proud of, for example, in your field that is already now contributing to addressing issues related to climate change?
You know, science in general has flourished from my point of view in democracies. It didn't succeed in countries that have totalitarian regimes. So from time to time, people say, you know, what do scientists care about the regime? You know, they should go to the laboratories and work. What do they care? They do care because, you know, we need to keep freedom of speech. We need to keep freedom of movement and so on and so forth. But I want to go and dig deeper into this point. We never know what will be the outcome of science. I can give you my own example. About 40 years ago, yes, 40 years ago, we started our project, and it was completely curiosity driven. It has no implications at all to medicine or to diseases. Government would have come to me and asked me, Aaron, you know, should we invest in your research? Should we invest in your university supporting you? Will it bring something in the future? I would tell them, I don't know. I don't know. I am driven by curiosity. I have no anything that I can foresee that will ever develop in the future. It took 25 years, and the first drug showed up in the market in 2005. Now it's a $20 billion industry, and in 2030, it will grow to $50 billion industry. Based on our research, people understand now mechanisms of many cancers, they understand mechanisms of brain diseases, and they are developing new drugs. It tells you that what matters in science are good people, and you let them, what I call, fly on the wings of their imagination. Don't limit them. If you ask me, if you would have forced me 40 years ago to work on cancer, nothing of all that would have happened. Nothing. Scientists should not be forced to work on some subject that the government think it's important. You know, the field of science should remain open for the imagination of scientists, because we never know and we cannot predict what will come out. And I think that our research is a good example for something that was completely unpredictable, and all of a sudden it became the main highway in biomedical research, in understanding diseases, in development of drugs. So, and of course, you know, physicists are interested in the universe. They are interested in asteroids, they are interested in the stars. Americans and other countries are sending satellites and missions to Mars, because we do need to understand our world. You know, we are human beings at the end, and one of our fundamental characteristics is curiosity. And curiosity is something that we need to satisfy. Otherwise, we shall not be human beings. This is what makes us different than the animals that are living side by side with us. Curiosity. So even if flying to the Mars will not lead to development of any drug, or will not alleviate climate change, one, we don't know, it may in the future, but even if it will not, it still satisfy a basic fundamental need of human being, and that's knowledge. And knowledge, remember, you mentioned at the very beginning of our talk, knowledge is important not only in order to commercialize it, not only in order to make it practical. Why do we read books? Why do we go to the theater? Why do we go to the opera? Why do we go to the movies? Why we drink alcohol? Why we meet one another? There are other needs. You know, we are not living practical life, and every morning we think about the drugs that we have to develop, or the climate change that we have to change. We are human beings, and therefore our life are much more interesting and surrounded by other things that may not lead to development of drugs or to solve problems, but they are essential for our very existence as human beings. Therefore, science should remain in democracies a completely free enterprise.
But what about the limitation imposed by the resources of a country? We have natural capital, we have imported manufactured goods and services, we have human capital, but then we have limited resources.
Yeah, so let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Would you recommend to cancel the Faculty of Philippine History in the University of Manila? Would you like to cut it off, to send the professors home? Why is to learn Philippine history? Is it important? Why to learn the origins of the Philippine language, the origin of Philippine ethnicities, the different people that make the Philippines. Should you cancel it? Should you make only a university that teaches mathematics, computer sciences, and chemistry, removing all the rest, which is less important? Now I'm responding to you with a question, and I can answer you. The answer is a big no. Big no, with an exclamation mark. Why? Because it's very important to learn Philippine history. Because if we shall not learn the history, it will recur in the future. If we shall not draw lessons from the past will hit us again in the future. As one example. So if the country is limited, you find priorities. You do prioritize, of course, because you don't have endless amount of money. But you should be very careful to keep science free. Of course, you have developed departments of engineering and faculties of medicine that are educating the practical echelon that the market is needing in order to keep on running. But yes, linguistic people, historians, philosophers, would you give up on writers, on poetry, on maybe the government of Philippines doesn't need any theater, so why not to destroy the building of the theaters in Manila and build something which will be more practical? I wouldn't have agreed in my lifetime. Never, ever. What about archaeology? You have nice archaeological sites in the Philippines, don't you? Israel has beautiful ones.
Yes.
It takes money to dig them. We do need to understand how our ancestors were living. It really gives us lesson for ourselves, not only cultural lessons, but also lessons for the future about our development as human beings. So, practicality is one thing, but our soul and spirit are as important.
Would you like to share with us some parting words? And you can also comment on the other areas in your statement: policy, mission-driven innovation, information technology, finance, and business. Because we have focused so far on education, scientific collaboration, and knowledge.
Okay, I could just mention a few words on information technology, which is extremely important because I think part of the future is really embedded in information technology. I will bring you just one example. People are, which again brings me back not only to information technology, but also for sharing data between countries. Many people, Israel, for example, has one big or two big insurance agencies that insure the entire population. So they have all the information on a big amount of population, on a large proportion of population.
Aaron, are these public institutions?
Yeah. They are all coming, they are all public, and they are insuring the entire population. And they have a lot of information buried in their computer. So let's say that they know all the people in Israel that are taking a certain drug, let's say a drug for high blood pressure. Okay? So they know, they look at the computer will in 1 minute will give you 2 million people that take drug for high blood pressure. Then you can say, aha, I have all the people that take a drug for high blood pressure. Now I can ask myself many other questions. Are they suffering from other diseases? And let's say that all of a sudden I discover that they have less heart disease. Okay, or they'll have less prostate cancer, or they have less Alzheimer. Then I might argue that maybe the drug that is given for blood pressure is also good for Alzheimer. Without even doing any experiment, all the information is buried in the statistics in the computer. So it's called going in reverse. So now I can take the drug and go back to the lab and test it on Alzheimer model in a mouse. I don't say that it will work against Alzheimer, but there is a connection. If a population of people that is taking a drug for high blood pressure, all of a sudden I discover that they have a low incidence of Alzheimer, maybe the same drug is also working on Alzheimer. So I might have a drug for Alzheimer. Or maybe they have higher Alzheimer rate. So maybe the drug, beside curing blood pressure, causing Alzheimer. So now I will be more cautious in giving it. So from information technology, which is buried deep in the computers, I can draw a lot of conclusion by looking at population analysis. And then on top of it came artificial intelligence. I don't want to really broaden the scope, but with artificial intelligence, we can mine and dig into areas that we cannot even predict what will happen there, because the computer can see things that me, with my eyes, I can never see. It can look at all kinds of data without even asking it any questions, and it can dig out for me all kinds of information that I even didn't dream to ask or to think of. And that also should be shared by countries. And the IP, the intellectual property borders should be really lower. So yes, information technology and the power of computing is going to play a major, major part. I work in Israel, so I have a deep leg in my country, but science is international. Science knows no borders of gender, of language, of religion, of culture, of history. Science is an international enterprise that is there to benefit people wherever they are. And the world that we are living, except that it has become really dangerous recently. You know, we thought that we are beyond the era of war, but here we see the cruel war between Russia and Ukraine. And we are still, the human being is still the cruelest creature that God has created. We are killing one another for the sake of killing, unfortunately. And on the other hand, you know, it's very strange. While killing one another, we are also developing drugs to cure one another. So these two things are a little bit contradictory. So I just pray for a better world with more mercy, more cooperation between people, because people are people all over. They have the same very needs. And I hope to be able to visit your country sometime soon back again and hosting you here in our wonderful country.
Thank you very much, Dr. Aaron, and we really look forward to having you with us again in the Philippines.
All the best, Cora. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, so thank you very much, Dr. Aaron, for sharing your expertise and knowledge, of course, about science, education, of course, linking it to the climate change. And of course, we'd like to thank Dr. Cora for the arrangement in doing the discussion. Okay, so may we now call back again Uriel, Mr. Uriel and Dr. Cora, no, for the Q&A. Unfortunately, we are running out of time, so we can only take the first two questions, no, as typed on our chat box, no. So we have a first question for Mr. Uriel. How can the widening digital divide be addressed? Almost 3 billion people are still offline or do not have access to the internet. And how can ICTs be utilized more to address the climate change crisis, target gender equality, empower the next generation, create green jobs and better food systems, and protect human rights?
Okay, thank you very much for the questions. I'll answer both of them in the same time. I think that ICT and generally technology can address different meaningful issues when you have the resources, the policy, and the right people that are building these solutions to address actual needs. And when I say actual needs, I mean people's needs, and not another app to get you gamble, or another game on your phone, or another solution for privileged people. We need solutions that can address the entire population of the world. And I think that specifically today, when we're looking at people that are disconnected from the internet, from energy, from other infrastructure, there's a big opportunity to get them connected in a much faster, more efficient, and more sustainable way. In this sense, I think Israel here has the potential to be a great support. I didn't mention it in my talk, but Israel is now leading almost $1 billion funding for climate technologies, and these technologies are going to support the different actual needs that are happening around the world. And I believe that this is one of the main ways to get there.
Okay, so thank you very much, Uriel, for that answer. So we have a question for Dr. Cora. The question is, what are the current initiatives in addressing the 5 ocean challenges? First, mapping the ocean. Second, sustainable seafood. Third, ending ocean waste. Fourth, renewable ocean energy. And the fifth, set sail for zero.
I mentioned some of them, especially on sustainable seafood, that is seaweeds, the project that we have. And I think the Fisheries Bureau is also attending to that. We have different government organizations and even NGOs also attending to this. But I mentioned that we need to really set up a center that will take care of these results of these initiatives and the studies so that we can build a database. The problem is when you need something, you are searching, you want to take action, but you have to go all over the place to find what you want. So I mentioned in my talk the things that can be done, setting up the center, having a warning system, having an app, and doing a lot more on inventory taking of our resources. On ocean waste, that really starts from you and me, okay? So we have to look at what we are doing in our houses and see to it that we segregate our waste. Because if we will mix them, there is no motivation actually to the ones collecting the garbage to reduce the volume that they get, right? There's none. I think it is Isa, my friend's personal initiative to address it and to force segregation by motivating people to separate and get credits for the plastic that they turn in. That requires a lot of behavioral. The problem here is behavioral actually. That is why I agree with Dr. Aaron that we must develop the values for loving the environment, protecting the environment right from the start of the schooling of our youth, kindergarten. We must start from there. Okay. Renewable ocean energy, well, we're looking at the smaller ones. We're looking at the TISEC technologies that can be part of what I have been promoting, distributed energy systems. So far, we have been too worried about base load generation, coming up with big plants and then distributing the power generated through the national grid, which by itself needs improvement. And so, we always have this recurring problem even if we are able to generate enough base load capacity. So, we really need more distributed energy systems in islands because we have 7,641 islands that are not really close enough to each other, and so each one of them must have their own source of energy. Set sail for, is that net zero?
Yeah.
Well, that's a big topic that I encourage you to multitask. I don't have a maid now, and so I cook. And when I'm cooking, I listen to all of these videos. There are many of them, and you will really learn a lot. Even Planetech has been uploading in their website nice videos, and we have, as I said, we have our Cast for You YouTube channel. We have not produce the third and others, but we have them on our plate. But we need help in this, and so if you have material, we'll be happy to share them with others. So we are coming up with also a platform where our CASA Facebook, you try to look at it, and you will see there Attorney Dulce Punsalan, who is here, is one of our most industrious members, posting a lot of developments from all over the world, meetings, webinars that you can attend for free. By the way, I'd like to greet our CMOG, the office at the Philippine Navy, and you can see there a conference table full of participants here, no? I love these people, okay? I hope to be able to return to you under a new administration. Okay, so what else? Ocean waste. That, as I said, that's a big problem. But we really have to do let's start with ourselves, no? The initiative must come from each one of us. And then we join organizations that can strengthen further our own personal resolve to care for our environment. What I did when I was chairing MAP's Environment Committee is to make my members fall in love with the environment. So I would bring them to beautiful places, because my reasoning is that if you love somebody, correct? Especially the men or the women, if you love somebody or something, automatically you will protect it, right? So that's what we need. We need more positive feelings and values from each one of us, not killing each other, as Dr. Aaron said. Okay. I'd
Okay,
like
so
to...
thank you very much, Dr. Cora, and of course, Uriel. No, so we really have to love our planet Earth, and we really have to have a great concern to our environment. We must really take good care of our environment. So unfortunately, we cannot anymore take any questions, but we will forward all the typed-in questions to our respective esteemed guest speakers, so that they can be able to answer and get back to the questions. No. So thank you once again to our esteemed great speakers, Mr. Clark, Dr. Claudio, and Dr. Saishinover, for all the learnings, insights, and all the knowledge that we got today. No, we really learned a lot. And of course, we would like to thank once again our valued sponsors. Thank you to our Platinum member, Exlinkevents, to our Gold members, Diana Business Consultancy and Star K Co-Share. And thank you all for joining us in this afternoon. See you all at our Israel Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines next event. God bless, stay safe, and have a great week ahead, everyone. Maraming salamat po. Thank you very much.